Hi everyone, this is Ilina Crouse and welcome to another card video. In this video, I'm featuring the new MISTI, the new version of the MISTI, along with several products from Pinkfresh Studio, mainly the pop-up background stamps. So here's a little snapshot of the cards that we'll be making today. There are 5 cards, so I was going to make one, but I ended up with 5. So here is the product I'm using. Like those are the first 2 that I'll be using, the pop-up chevron stripes, along with the Celebrate Us stamp set and dies. And this is the new MISTI. It's a little bit different than the original MISTI. The grid is engraved. There is a little slot for the bar magnet. There's a little lip on the lid. Also, the grid on the lid is gray, not kind of clear. And you can have the door of the MISTI standing up, so it doesn't need to go all the way to the end. So here are several of the products that we're going to be using today. I didn't end up using the hexagon pop-out stamp, so we're just going to use the stripes, the diamond, and the chevron. So here I have a mat in my MISTI. I'm using crack cut light grip mat, so it holds. I like using this one for stamping directly on die cuts and also on background stamps, so I don't need to adhere my piece of cardstock to the bottom of the MISTI. So or the foam, I just put down that light grip mat, and it holds my cardstock in place. So what I'm doing here, I'm using the chevron pop-up background, and I just added. I positioned it over my piece of cardstock. I'm using 4¼ by 5½ inch piece of white cardstock. So you can see all these pieces of that background stamp, they pop out. So I started with the first one. So I'm using 3 shades of green. I'm using Melon Eyes, Sprout, and Parsley. So I'm going in ombre look. So we're gonna get kind of repeated colors because I'm using 3 greens. So we're gonna go from lightest to the darkest, and then again starting from the lightest. So once I stamp one of those pop-out stamps, I line up the second one, and then I remove the previous one. So this will ensure that everything is lined up when you're stamping. So here we're going back to that lighter green, and then we're going to use the medium. I'm lining up the stamp, removing the previous one, inking it up with Sprout ink, stamping. Now I'm going to line, well, I decided to go one more time. Now I'm going to the next 2 stamps. Those are separate, so I line both up, and then I remove the previous one. So it makes it really easy to stamp with the MISTI with this kind of stamps, and the end result is fabulous. I really love this multicolor effect, so you don't need to do the background only in one color. So next I'll just remove my background. I'll pop in another piece of cardstock, and I'm going to use the same background stamp, and I'll do a rainbow order. So now I'm starting, since I had positioned those 2 last stamps on the corner, so I'm starting from there and moving backwards compared to previous. So I'm lining up the larger pieces. I need to clean those up since I'm using different colors. So first I use Oceanside, next I'm using Aqua Sky. Now we're going to go with green. I'm putting that stamp in, lining it up with the previous one, removing the previous one. I'm using Parsley. I'm going to stamp there. Again, lining that stamp, cleaning it up, making sure that it's nice and clean. Now we're going to use Buttercup, because since I'm using yellow, I had to make sure that the stamp is nice and clean. So I'll go one more time for a better impression, more saturated look of that yellow. Again, I'm lining up the next one, removing the previous one. I'm going to use marmalade ink here. Again, cleaning it up, lining up that next one, again cleaning, making sure it's nice and clean. I'm using here cranberry ink. Again, lining up that last stamp, making sure it's nice and clean again. I'm using pink like Hollyhock and stamping that twice. And we're done with the background. So that was quick and easy, and we have this beautiful multicolored background. So let's do a couple more. Now I'll be using the rainbow Popout stamp. Just trying to position to see how that will go in the MISTI and on my cardstock. So I just decided to pop out one of those, the largest strip, and position it on my cardstock. And see how that goes. Okay, so now we're done. We can remove that the frame around. I'm just counting how many strips there are, so I pick out enough colors. So I'm starting with Oceanside ink for that largest arc of the rainbow. I'm lining up the second one, making sure that it's nice and flush to the previous one. I removed the previous one, and now I'm using Aqua Sky ink to stamp that one. Again, I'm lining up that the next size down. I'm using Parsley ink, and I'm repeating the same process, just going down that those strips, lining up one, removing the previous one, and stamping. I use Melon Ice here. Now I'll use Buttercup. I'll stamp one more time, cleaning that one up, lining the next one. I'm using Marmalade ink here. Again, cleaning, lining the next one. Here I'm using Cranberry. Clean up, line the next one. I'll use Hollyhock. I hope that I'm pronouncing that correctly. So stamp twice with that one to have nicer coverage. I'm going to the tiny ones now. I line that up, clean it up. I'm using Sangria ink. And then the last tiny bit one, I'll use Eggplant ink. I lined it up and removed the previous one, and I stamped. So there's our rainbow background. We have 3 so far. Let's do one more. Now I'm doing the nested diamonds pop out background. So I'm starting with one, and I'm trying to line it up in the middle there. It's nice and centered. So for this one, we're gonna go toward inwards, and then we're gonna go outwards. So this it's a little bit more work, but it's totally doable. And you can start from the center, from the smallest one, and then move out. And I just started from the middle and going inwards and then backwards. So I started with Buttercup. Next I'm using Melon Ice. So we're going to go to greens and blues towards the center, and then orange and pink towards the outer diamond frame. So next, the third one, I'm using here Melon Ice. Not Melon Ice, but Aqua Sky. I stamp a couple of times. I'm doing the last one, making sure that it's nice and centered there. So ink it up and stamp, and for this one I used Oceanside. So next, after the yellow, so I'm just lining those up again, going back to the size that we stamped the yellow one. And then I'm going to position the next one, so that's our yellow. So now we're going to the next size up, and those are 2 separate stamps. I'm lining it up on the sides. So now we have everything lined up, and I'm removing the center stamps. So now I'm using grapefruit ink to stamp that frame. One more time to have nice and more saturated look. Next I'm lining up the edges there. There are 4 individual stamps. Then cleaning it up, making sure it's nice and clean, removing that previous one. Now I'm using Hollyhock and stamping that down. And then we have one more to go. So next I'm positioning those tiny ones. Those are not the last one, but because our piece of paper is 5.5 by 4.25, we don't need that the little corner pieces that are left out. So Just removing the previous one, I'm using Flirty Fuchsia. And we're done here. I'm just cleaning my stamps. And I can take that background out. So now that we're done with the background stamps, I put back my mat in the MISTI. Next, I'll be using the Celebrate You stamp set to stamp a couple of those flowers. Then I was going to stamp only one, but because I had space on my piece of paper, I stamped two and then I ended up with one more card. I'm using black ink to stamp first the outline. I turned over my paper. I stamped one more time. Next, we're going to position that the first layer of the flower. Make sure that it's lined up. I apologize if you see my head along the process of lining up here. I'll use Aqua Sky and Honeysuckle to stamp the first layer. So I'm drying that black ink because I use VersaFine ink to make sure that it's nice and dry before I stamped. I turn it around and now I'm going to stamp with the Honeysuckle. Okay, next we're going to do, there's only one layer for the leaves. So there are two separate leaf stamps. I apologize for my head there. I'm trying to line it up. So I'm doing both at the same time. And it's only one layer for the stamps. I'll use parsley ink. I'm stamping a couple times to have nice and saturated look. Okay. So we're done with the leaves. Now we're going to go with the second layer of the flower. And I'll use darker ink here. I'm lining it up there. Again, my head is in the way. I'm using Oceanside ink to stamp that second layer on the Aqua Sky. And first I tried with poppy ink for the pink flower, for the Honeysuckle flower, but it didn't give me much contrast, so I decided to go with cranberry. And then we're going to do the center, and we're going to use the buttercup ink for the center of the flowers. Again, my head is in the way. I'm trying to center that flower center. I'm inking it up a couple times and stamping, turning around and repeating the process. So now we're done with the stamping on the flowers, and we're going to move on to die cutting those flowers using the coordinating dies. Also in the die set, there's like a die that says thankful. It's 2-layer die. So we're going to die cut the backing of white and the thankful in black. So by magic of YouTube, I'm back here with already die cut pieces. We're going to use that red flower for the green chevron. Then I have the thankful sentiment. I'll use some adhesive to adhere both layers. I'm going to put acrylic block on top to make sure that it dries flat. So while that dries, I will assemble my cards, and then I decided to use the blue flower right away. And I'm using a couple sentiments from the Believe in Yourself stamp set. So in meantime, I'll do the other thankful. I die cut 2 of those thankful. I'm going to use for one of the cards later on. So now I'm going to trim my background to 4 by 5 1/4. I'm making sure that that center line goes at the 2-inch mark after it's trimmed down. So that's how I measure, position it in my trimmer to cut it out. And then I'm cutting just white panel from white cardstock, measuring 4 by 5 1/4. I'm positioning those sentiments, and I'm using black ink to stamp them onto my white panel. So the flower is going to go there. So I'm just putting my sentiments back in the stamp set so I don't lose them. Also, Believe in Yourself stamp set comes with coordinating dies, and there's like Believe die cut that matches the sentiment that you can stamp directly on the cardstock, and that there is also a backing piece. So I'm going to die cut those. I'm going to use my MISTI to stamp directly on that white layer. I'm using the negative from the die cut. I'm going to position the stamp right there, pick it up with the lid of the MISTI, position the die cut. I'm just putting the little dot from the eye and stamping directly onto that die cut. Just gonna remove here with my pokey tool. Please try to. Okay, so we have that belief, and it looks pretty nice when it's layered on that black background. So let's stamp this Thankful For You, the little For You that comes from the same stamp set, Celebrate You. I'm stamping it a couple times so we have nice impression of that blue. So next we're gonna layer this Believe sentiment. I'm just trying to see which one I should use for that nested diamond background. So let's start assembling our cards. I'm using some foam tape to add on the back of the flower. I'll also add foam tape on the back of the sentiment, the thankful. I'll just cut a little strip there. I think that was a little too wide, so I trimmed a little bit off from there too. I'm making sure that it's nice and straight, and that's done. So let's do the next one with the aqua sky flower. Since we already have the stamp sentiment, we're just adhering the flower. So let's move to the next three cards. I'm popping in that die cut again. I'll stamp another Believe. I already had die cut the sentiment. I'm stamping twice. So we'll need a couple of those sentiments that we're going to use for the next cards. So I'll put my MISTI away here. And then I'm using, again, from Believe in Yourself. I'm trying to find which of the sentiments I wanted to use. So I'm just picking out a couple of those sentiments. And while I'm doing that, I decided to adhere Believe onto the black background, the backing piece. And put acrylic block on top and let it dry while I'm doing the stamping and embossing on black cardstock. I apologize. So I'm just adding the black cardstock here and making sure that it's nice and straight. I'm using the creative corners, and I apologize here. My MISTI is off the camera where I'm stamping. I just lined up that sentiment on the bottom of the MISTI. And I added some anti-static powder. And I'm stamping a couple times with Versamark and then embossing in white, using white embossing powder. So now I'll just heat set it. Make sure it's nice and melted. Okay, I'll use my paper trimmer to trim the little strip there and trim the little ends. So we have here the panel, and I think that looks good. I'm just trimming the panel down to 4 by 5.25, and I'm making sure that those diamonds are centered. The center line goes through the 2-inch mark. So it says dreams believed are dreams achieved. So I really like that sentiment, and sentiment like believe, dreams believed are dreams achieved. And then I'm adding some foam tape on the back of the black strip also. Just making sure that that's nice and centered and it's straight. So we have 3 so far. Just realized I need to add a little bit tiny more foam tape on that thankful die cut there. So we have 2 left. So for this one, I'm just trying to look what sentiment I should use. I'm going to use the thankful die. And then Thankful Florals stamp set. There's a little tiny sentiment there that I decided to use. So now I'm using the modern layered flowers. I'm using few sentiments to stamp on black cardstock, and I'm gonna use them in conjunction with that sentiment belief. And then from the floral thank you stamp set, I'm using a little tiny sentiment to use together with the thankful. So again, the bottom of my MISTI is off the camera here. I'm just lining up those 3 separate strip sentiments, and I'm using my L ruler to make sure that they're straight when I'm picking them up with the lid of the MISTI. So you can see here that was just the last one. I'm going to stamp with Versamark a couple times and then emboss with white embossing powder. Just applying that embossing powder here. I'll use my heat tool to heat that from the back, and then I'm going from the front. So I think we're done here. So now I'll adhere the belief sentiment onto the black backing piece and a little dot on the eye also. And then let it dry while I'm assembling the cards. So while that's drying, I'm using my paper trimmer to trim those strips that we just stamped and embossed. Okay, we have all of those. And then also I'll trim down the rainbow background down to 4 by 5¼ inches panel. I'm just trimming those sentiments and adding some foam tape on the back. I think that's good. Next, I'm using my cut and align tool to make sure that the sentiments are adhered straight. Okay, so we have that background. We have one more. So here I'm using 2 stamp strips along with the belief sentiment. And it just says, believe we're stronger together, we'll get through this, which is pretty appropriate for all the stuff that's happening around the world and all the global pandemic we're going through at this time. So we're stronger together and we're gonna get through this together. So I think that was a good reminder for anyone who would receive this card. So again, I'm using the foam tape to adhere those sentiments and the cut and align tool to make sure that they're straight. Again, I'm adding the believe. So we have all 5 panels here, and I have 5 pieces of fun foam and 5 top folding white note cards. So I'm just assembling everything together, just again adding adhesive on the panel, then on the fun foam, and adhering it to my note card, making sure that they're lined up and they're positioned. We have equal distance on all 4 sides when we adhere it to those note cards. So that's the reason usually I'm using liquid glue, because I have a little bit more wiggle room. I can make sure that they're nice and straight and centered. So we have 2 more to go. And next, the last one, that was our extra one that we didn't use those pop-out backgrounds. I'm adhering to that white note card. So now one finishing touch, we are adding some jewels onto the cards. I'm using the Pinkfresh Studio jewels, like the whole pack. I'm using some of the white and some of the black. So I'm just adding tiny dots of glue on adhesive on my cards, and then just dropping those jewels on top. This side here, I needed a few more in the upper left corner. So I'm adding 3 more there. So that once it's done, I'm going to add 3 on each side on this one too. I was contemplating whether I should use black or white, so I decided to go with white. It's kind of more subtle, and we're going to use some of the black ones on some other cards. So here, this one, it's more bright colors, so I decided to go with the black to create even a little bit more pop as well. So I'm adding 3 dots of glue there and dropping those rhinestones in there too. For the rainbow card, I decided to do the black rhinestones too. The black jewels. And then one more. And then I'll go with the white one for this floral card. Kind of more elegant and more subtle look. So, we're done. So here's a little closer look of the cards that we made together, all 5 of them. And thanks for watching. Again, here's another kind of slower look of those. And if you like this video, don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Also visit my blog for more ideas and inspirations. Thanks for watching and see you soon in another video. Bye!